Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor here. This week, we truly have a treat. We have a woman with us who, through her 21-day sugar detox program, has helped over 15,000 people break their insane sweetener addiction. She has been a New York Times best-selling author for many weeks. She is the proprietor of balancebites.com. She is a certified nutrition consultant. She is Diane Sanfilippo is with us in the building. Diane, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you? That was an amazing intro. I love it.
I got to start us up high so we stay there. That's the plan. So I'm just so happy to have you on the show because let's not delay anymore. The thing I just wanted to get to right from the start is I want to learn a little bit about you and your background. But as soon as we get through that, you have practical in the title of your book, Practical Paleo. And I want to dig into that because, Diane, I cannot tell you how often I get asked, I talk about eating a sane diet or sane lifestyle, which is really very similar to a paleo lifestyle. And I keep hearing folks, it's hard. It's not practical. And you have busted that myth up so well. I want to dig into that. But first, tell us your story.
Sure. Well, I started out probably, getting into this whole nutrition thing because I was interested in some weight loss. And what's funny is that in order to lose weight, I kind of went through some different diet methods and went to a nutritionist, a standard nutritionist, and I did lose the weight, but I never really got healthier. And so, I was an athlete in high school and I had some health problems, but they were nothing that anyone would ever think, was a problem at the time. Digestive distress, chronic sinus infections. Every time I went to the eye doctor, my vision was deteriorating little by little. Every time I went to the dentist, there was something new cropping up. And this was all very normal, right? It's not something that, when I go through this list now, it sounds like, wow, she was really sick. But the reality is I was just like everyone else, popping different types of, antacids and all that stuff that was just totally common. But as we know now, not normal. And I was an athlete then, and I went through college and gained weight. And so I needed to do something about it. Finally made some changes, lost the weight, did not get any healthier. All of those chronic health conditions remained. And so it was until I met this one trainer that I worked with in San Francisco. His name's Dave Engen. He's an amazing trainer. And he came to me one day after I'd already been to a nutritionist. He'd always talked to me about food. And he said, I want you to eat coconut oil. And I said, you're crazy. I'm going to get fat. I can't eat that. It's saturated fat. And, I just thought it was insane. And, it took me some time, like a lot of people who don't sort of believe the things that we might teach them, that eating certain things won't make them fat and that it's healthy for them. And it took me time and research and reading to actually do it and to try it. And there was this one day where instead of cooking chicken breast and broccoli in spray olive oil in a pan, right? I cooked chicken thighs, which are fattier, in some coconut oil, and I had that with kale. And I ate half of what I made. And it was this light bulb moment for me that satiety does not come from a huge full plate. It comes from the right nutrients. And so, I was eating pretty healthfully before, but I made a lot of changes. And so, I started a meal delivery business, which is where the name Balanced Bites came from. I was actually balancing meals for people very specifically. And I just got to the point where I realized that I was not teaching anyone to fish, so to speak. And so I needed to go back to school and relearn more of this sort of background about nutrition, and went to a 2-year nutrition program. It was pretty intense and really enjoyed it. And just kind of took it from there. And what's really cool is that I learned a lot about how food works in the body, a lot about the biochemistry, how to coach people, which is, I think, where a lot of the sort of practical application of what I do today comes in, and how I can help people on this sort of more broad scale than just a 1-to-1 or even just in like a 50 to 100 person seminar, working with people on Facebook, even who just ask questions, or through the podcast. I can do so much work with that sort of practical application. And I think what's also really interesting is that, I learned about holistic nutrition. So what I teach in sort of a paleo approach in this grain-free is not what I learned in school per se years ago, but it's what I've, no pun intended, but it's what I've evolved to in my own, continued education, learning from guys like Rob Wolf, Mark Sisson, and, Chris Kresser and all these people who are out there. So, that's kind of what took me to where I am now. And I started teaching seminars and got to a point where I was answering the same questions over and over again. And I think it's most notable in listening to a lot of other podcasts out there. I remember listening to an interview with Paul Chek. I don't know if you're familiar with Paul Chek, but he's an amazing, amazing guy. And I just remember hearing him be interviewed, and he would answer these questions very often with, "Have you read my book yet?" And I realized that when you get the same questions over and over and you have a lot to say about it and people want to know your opinion, your take, your point of view, you need to put it in one place. And so that's what I did with my book, Practical Paleo. And I think that's why people are finding it so useful and practical, is that I'm putting sort of the background, biochemistry, science, and the nutrition consultant in me to use, as well as sort of the chef in me. I had the meal business. I've grown up cooking, put that all in one place so people could get the background, an application part in the meal plans, and then the recipes, like here's how to do it and here's why, all in one place.
I love it. I love the approach of the teaching to fish rather than giving fish. And in a spirit of teaching about fish, what would you say if you could give, certainly you can never summarize an entire book in just a few minutes, but if you could give 3 practical tips, like 3 practical take-home tips, I want to start eating a more nutritious, Paleolithic, sane diet today. How can I make that practical? Top 3 tips.
Okay, to get started today, the first thing that I would tell people, and this, all this information is in my book, but I don't present it in this same exact way of, here are the 3 things you should do right now. But the first thing I like for people to do is to make an oil change. So this sort of touches on just getting the right fats and oils into our body. And it doesn't matter what else you're eating. It doesn't matter if you're, not interested in certain types of meat or fish or whatever it is, but everyone's eating some type of fat, right? And I think that there are a lot of misconceptions around which ones are healthy. I'm definitely a proponent for eating a lot more naturally occurring saturated fat than any other type of fat at all, with some moderate consumption of monounsaturated fats like olive oil. The saturated fats that I like the best are things like lard from a pastured pig, tallow from grass-fed cows. I like grass-fed butter, or if you need to clarify it, that would be ghee. Coconut oil is great. And those are pretty much kind of the top of what I would consider, for saturated fats. There's others, of course. And then monounsaturated being things like olive oil, some other types of oil like macadamia nut oil is okay. Those are best for cold applications. And then really, really minimizing things like any vegetable oils should all be thrown away from your house. We shouldn't be stocking any kind of corn oil, canola oil, soybean oil, anything just called vegetable oil. None of that should be in anybody's home. So, regardless of what else they're eating or not eating, that's really the very first step I like for people to take. I just think it's the easiest and has the most positive effect on our health. And that's really because, kind of the quick reason is that fats start to incorporate into the lipid bilayer that make up our cells, and they actually take longer to change out than other types of nutrients that we're eating. So once those fats are incorporated into our cell walls, so if we've got a lot of bad fats coming in, like the trans fats or damaged omega-6 fats, for example, or even damaged omega-3s, that stuff is incorporating into our cell, and we really don't want that to happen. We really want the best, most stable fats to do that. So the second thing I would recommend is that people enlist a buddy, whether that's a family member. Hopefully it's somebody in your own house so that you are, sort of cooking together, making better choices together. But I would say, doing this alone, unless you live alone or work alone where there's no one else there to kind of derail you. And even if you are living or working alone, I think getting someone else to kind of do it with you, to be accountable to ask questions or just to help each other out, I think is really helpful. And then the third thing I would say is to make a plan and get started with one step at a time. Because I think a lot of times this happens, I know, with New Year's resolutions, for example. People make a list of like 3 to 5 or even 10 things that they're going to change and start doing. And it's just too overwhelming, and that might last for a week. And what I don't want people to do is to think this is a diet. It's about changing your lifestyle. And in order to do that, you really need to create new habits. And so attacking sort of 1, maybe 2 things at a time, and then mastering those changes and then moving forward. And that's one of the things that I do with the 21-day sugar detox is present changes in different levels for people so that they can approach it from like level 1, it's a pretty big change for a lot of people, but you know what? Level 2 and 3 are even harder. So don't jump there if you haven't already made these first set of changes. And it's okay. It's actually even better to start with fewer changes. So that's kind of where I would have people start.
Well, I love that. I love that. So step 1, it sounds like, just to capture, and correct me if I misrepresent this, is almost redefining what you consider healthy fats. Because I think a lot of people thought that those vegetable oils and those corn oils are the healthy fats that they're supposed to be using. And in fact, they're not. That's the bill of goods that we've been sold for the past 40 years. So redefine what you consider healthy fats. Number 2 is don't do it alone. So get yourself some support. And that's certainly backed up in my experience, not only practically, but also in the literature, just in terms of social commitment means success. And then finally this is not a diet. This is a lifestyle change. And when you're going to make a lifestyle change, gradual and calm and consistent is the way to go. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Well, and to that point of lifestyle change, one thing, Diane, I wanted to get your take on is I often get questions along the lines of like, do you ever cheat? Or what do you think about cheat days? And what I tell people, and this is kind of a funny analogy, is when you ask me that question, it's kind of like you're asking a vegetarian, do you ever cheat and eat meat? And the vegetarian's response is, well, no, and I don't want to. It's not even like I'm not actively fighting against a desire to eat meat. I just don't eat meat. And I would imagine with like a SANE or Paleolithic type lifestyle, that's what I see. And I'm curious if that's what you see and what you have your clients seeing is once they start living this way, it's not a burden. It's not something you want to cheat from. It's just what you do. What do you think?
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, and I ask that question a lot when I teach seminars. I ask people because I generally get a group who for the most part have been eating sort of a paleo grain-free type of diet for at least a year, right? And, I tell people that I don't actually ever eat grains, definitely not gluten-containing grains. And exactly what you said, it's not that I'm resisting this urge or temptation to, I literally have no desire. I'm just not interested in it. It sort of becomes, so I ask people, how many of you have been eating this way for a year? And so many people raise their hand. How many of you no longer care about bread? And they're all still raising their hands. And it's because you just get to this point where it becomes sort of like, make this joke about a Twinkie because are they even still made? I don't know. But I know that a lot of us who kind of make these healthy changes, we get to a point where that no longer looks like food to us, right? It's like, it's just not part of the dietary vernacular. We're just like, it's just not even on our radar anymore. And I think that's what happens with a lot of these other quote unquote foods that we sort of no longer even look at as food. I walk into Starbucks and this entire case of pastries, it's just not an option. It's just not something I'm interested in. I'm not like resisting it. I will say that I think the one thing that, I don't consider it to be cheating because I just don't consider this to be something that I feel needs to be a sort of never eat, but it's something like sweeteners and sugar, which is actually why the 21-day sugar detox is so important as a part of what I teach people because, we all sort of get, I think most people sort of get little, treats that sneak in here and there. And I don't really consider them to be a cheat. I consider that to be just kind of part of what's going on. And it's not part of what I do every day. It's not part of what I recommend other people do every day, but it's something that's used to celebrate and whatnot. And we just don't use the refined, nutrient poor forms of these ingredients that we might have used before. So for example, a cookie made from some hazelnut flour, that's just ground up hazelnuts and, some really clean chocolate chips and, sweetened with maple syrup. And it's, made with duck fat and some eggs and those are the ingredients and that's it. And I don't really consider that to be cheating. I just don't think that it's that big of a deal. And I think that it's something that you do randomly here or there, but that's kind of my take on it. And I know that people can kind of get off the rails with that type of thing. So that's kind of why I help rein them back in with something that kind of resets them for a few weeks and just changes some habits. But that's my take,
I love that. And another distinction I've heard about this, not really craving and not really feeling deprived, because again, it's once you eat this way, it just feels good. It's the way you do things is a bit like, I think most people have either gone from skim milk to whole milk or whole milk to skim milk, or from diet soda to regular soda or regular soda to diet soda. And when you make those transitions, it's not like, let's say you went from whole milk to skim milk, and we're not here to talk about whether or not milk is good or bad. This is just from an analogy perspective, or from regular soda to diet soda. You don't crave the previous thing anymore. You're just like, oh, I drink skim milk. And if you tried to drink whole milk, you might think it tastes bad, whereas in the past you thought it tastes good. Same thing with diet soda and regular soda is, if you go from regular soda to diet soda and you do that for long enough and you try a regular soda, it's not like you're actively fighting against that urge. Now, whether or not you should be drinking any of those substances is a different subject, but
that's a really good analogy though. Yeah, that is how it feels. It's not like you're walking around thinking about that thing that you no longer eat. It just doesn't even cross your mind.
Well, and I love also that you said this idea of the concept of needing to cheat, or these treats. We're very similar in the sense that my podcast co-host by the name of Carrie Brown, she's an ex-pastry chef out of Europe, and she's come up with all these wonderful, like she uses xylitol a lot, which is derived from birch bark, so it's all natural sweetener. And she makes these incredible treats, and they're wonderful for you. They're fantastic for you. In fact, I mean, I probably shouldn't do this as much as I do, but sometimes my whole dinner is something which traditionally would be more of a dessert, but it's so healthy that it's something that you can enjoy. So I'm cheating, but in some ways I'm actually being very good at the same time. So it's a bit of a paradox of sorts. Well,
yeah.
Diane, the other thing I wanted to talk to you a bit about is, one thing that I love about you and I love about what you're doing is you're bringing, I think, an awesome female vibe to this lifestyle, because even the earlier when you were mentioning sort of the people who you've learned from, you listed this list of guys. And it's even,
thanks, guys.
No, great, brilliant guys. But I want to hear from like a female's perspective. Tell me a bit about some of the maybe unique challenges or unique opportunities or things where if I said it, people would be like, Jonathan doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a guy. but we got Diane here bringing it down. Tell me a little bit about that.
I think there's a few different things that are really sort of like the main points that kind of come to mind when I think about the female perspective and what's happening in, the sort of healthier eating momentum. And I think part of it is that, eating fat isn't going to make us fat. We've already talked about that a little bit, but I think that's a huge one. And it's obviously amongst the community of people who already sort of know about this stuff. It's a done deal. They get it. It's cool. But the people who I talk to who, when I start to describe this to somebody who is completely unaware of this whole paradigm, and that it's not a paradox, actually, like the French paradox that they're eating, rich foods and not gaining weight, that it's the reality of our hormones. And so I think that, I think hearing it from a woman is actually really helpful. And I think, that even happened with me with the trainer who I mentioned. He was a male and never really had a issue with his weight. And it's not something that I struggled with for a long time, but it was that period of years where I just consistently gained weight. I was less active, eating the same, if not more. And it wasn't because I just got older. It was because I was less active and I was eating a lot, and, that's not to say that eating less and moving more is always the answer, because I don't think that that's true, but I was eating totally the wrong foods and really not moving at all. And so I think part of it's that just getting that fear away from women. I think it's also the fear of just eating in general. I think a lot of women, and this is, broad generalization, but of course, women who are interested in health are oftentimes very fearful of eating, the wrong foods, or they think that, they have too much body fat, or they think they just need to be leaner. And this is a really, really big thing that we see. We get a lot of questions on our podcast about body composition. And we're consistently, I say we, myself, and my co-host Liz Wolfe, who she has a blog over at cavegirleats.com. She and I are consistently answering questions about this. And, we're both normal weight females. We're strong. We exercise, we lift heavy things. We're happy individuals, we're just living life. And I think we're trying to help other women see that we don't need to be like stick figures or Barbie dolls or whatever it is to be healthy, vibrant women. And talking about this whole just level of health and leanness, and teaching women about the fact that healthy bodies mean healthy hormones, which means regular menstruation, because we have a lot of women who are dealing with PCOS, who aren't menstruating regularly. We have women who other women look at as sort of, their idols, but those women are not menstruating. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's something that we experience so much, even in workshops. Women will come up to us who look amazing to me, right? They look great. And they tell me they haven't had a period for 2 years. And I'm like, this is the kind of woman that other women look at and want to be like. But when the reality comes down, when they see what's underneath it all and they realize that woman's not actually healthy on the inside, it's become our job as, female voices in this community to tell all of the other women, hey, you know what? Great. If you can look like that and be healthy, I'm happy for you. But if you're not healthy there, you have to know that there's another way, and that, we all have to be advocates for each other and not be hard on each other, but really kind of just more supportive and nurturing in a way, offering each other that support. So there's just been a lot around that stuff, body image and all of that. And also just the emotional things around eating. We've talked a lot about this on our show, because I'll tell you, working with both male and female one-on-one clients over the years, male clients are so much easier. And it's hysterical to me, because you know what? I'm just like my clients so much of the time, that if I go to a practitioner and get a list of things to do, there's a million reasons why I didn't or I couldn't do them, right? And with this is just my experience that I'm expressing this. I know this is a generalization again, but with men, if I give them a list of like these 3 changes to make for the next 2 weeks, they come back and they've made those changes. And it's just, we are different animals in that way. We have different emotional attachments to things. So I think that all actually really plays into, every element of diet and lifestyle change. We can't expect men and women to react the same way, I don't think, emotionally or physically, to be honest. Even something like intermittent fasting, like most women don't really feel great doing that,
Absolutely. One thing that you hit on, which I just love, and I get I was raised by a brilliant college professor, female mother who is best characterized as a feminist. And she taught me such wonderful lessons. And one of the things that I love about what you're doing, and hopefully this doesn't come off as too gushy, but I think you represent what I would love to see as a new generation of strong women, because you're strong not only physically but also mentally, because you're bringing that strength, and I do mean strength from a physical perspective, but also you don't shy away from the science. So you come with that strength of mind as well. And that strong, powerful, empowered woman. I mean, again, just from a guy's perspective, I have yet to meet another guy, and maybe they just roll around in different circles, who say, oh man, look at that woman's ribs. Wow, that's attractive. Like it's not about that, right? Like I hope we've all evolved to use that term to appreciate the beauty that is strength, both of mind and body. And I think you represent that. And I think this movement represents that. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. That's a great compliment. I appreciate it.
Well, and I want to dig into that really quickly a little bit more. And that's, what are your thoughts? I mean, because you do, one of the things you do, which is very unique, is you've got, practical right there in your book title, but you back that up with quite a bit of science. And sometimes I fear, so this is another thing I sometimes see in the nutrition internet community, for lack of better terms, and I'm certainly guilty of it as well. And it ends up being a bunch of guys, excuse my language, having a pissing contest about whose science can beat up who else's science. Right? It's like, my dad can beat up your dad. Oh, no, my peer-reviewed academic research can beat up your peer-reviewed academic research. And I think the more we can bring in vibes like you have, which is very complimentary and kind, and brings it back down to earth a little bit, because again, there's no shortage of science out there, right? It's been known for a long, long time that saturated fat doesn't cause heart disease, for example. So the fact that is proven science hasn't actually helped the mainstream. So how can we help the mainstream? How can we get the mainstream to understand and make practical this proven science?
Well, I think what you're actually talking about in terms of my approach is that sometimes I actually say that I sort of hate the science. And that doesn't mean I actually hate the science. But what it means is that I don't get super geeked out, for lack of a better term, on the latest research. I know that sounds really strange, but I just try and take things back to physiology and biochemistry, at least to the degree that I've learned about them when it comes to nutrition and what's going on in our body in relation to food and how body systems should work. So the way that I relate this in the book is, here's how your body should work, specifically your digestive system, because that's where I really focus a lot of the attention, and as well as like the hormonal response to food when it comes to things like insulin and glucagon and how we respond to different types of refined foods, for example. But I look at this is how your body's supposed to work. If it's not working, these are the foods that I recommend might help you get back to working, to having your body work properly, right? These are the foods that I think are optimal foods. And here's a few reasons why I think some of these foods are not optimal. Now you just can go ahead and make that choice for yourself, what you're going to do about it. Because you know what? It's your body. If it's not working right and you think there could be something improved, well, here's a meal plan and go for it. And I don't want to kind of make this statement about like, these foods are killing you. These foods are bad. These foods are good. You know, I have this thing where I think it's either real food or it's not real food. It's either man-made and refined or it's from nature. And, you know, it's just not that complicated. And I just really, I think that we get too far away from what we're trying to do when we absorb ourselves with too much research, because you know who's doing research are people, and people make mistakes and people have agendas. Yep. And I think if we look at, you know, go back to, you know, if doctors had stopped learning about the body with like basic biology, physiology, biochemistry, and just looked at like, well, what are people doing? Is it supporting those things to work in their normal fashion or not? And if it's not working, let's look at the inputs. You know, it's like, it's just a totally different approach. And, you know, I get emails every day from like different, I don't know, Science Daily or whatever it is. And it's like more research that's out, and it's all, none of it's ever interesting or like earth shattering or anything either we didn't know or you know, it's all just like, hooey. I just think it's like a bunch of nonsense, because it almost is like a pissing match of scientists who are out there, you know, and I think Matt Lalonde would hate me for saying this, but, you know, I respect people who are doing the work in the right way, guys like Matt Lalonde and, you know, Chris Masterjohn, who are like, I'm just like thrilled that we have them as part of this community, because I think they're doing the right research. They're looking at what happens in the body with different food, and it's based on physiology and biochemistry, and it's not based on an agenda or selling a food or selling a drug. And I think that's what most people don't realize is what's happening out there. And I just can't keep sending out research and being like, look, this says this, that's what I've been saying all along, because like, I just don't need to prove myself right that badly. Yep. You know what I mean? I'm indifferent to that. I just really want people who are not healthy to find a way to get healthier. And I also don't tell people who tell me they feel great eating their grains and beans. If they say, I feel great, I'm healthy, I look, feel and perform how I want to, I've got nothing to say to that person. Absolutely. I'm not going to tell them this food is killing them if clearly it's not, you know? So, you know, I think that people get too kind of spun out on that angle. And I work with the people who are telling me they don't feel great, you know, and how can I fix that? Here's what I think will work.
Well, I just think that's beautiful. I mean, I love that the sentiment of our goal here is health and happiness. And frankly, if you can be healthy and happy eating donuts and drinking soda all day, like that's amazing. You must have some genetic mutation, which frankly, I might wish I had. And congratulations. But Diane, I'd love your take on this, because I want to keep going, because this is a thing I get passionate about too, where that's the goal is happiness and health. The goal isn't let me prove myself right, or let me bring you into my team or into my camp or convince you of things. It's just and I worry sometimes that individuals get confused, and I hope this doesn't offend any listeners, but like if you look at religion, like most religions, their goal is to make the world a happier and healthier place, and just to propagate goodness. But sometimes people get wrapped up in like the dogma, which is totally separate from the goal of helping people. And if we just took all the energy we spent like arguing about the things that don't actually matter from a practical perspective and focus that just on getting back to what I think we're all here to do, which is to help the 99% of the population, which still thinks saturated fat is going to kill you and that you just need to eat less of a traditional American diet and you'll be fine. Wow, could we make a difference?
Yes. Amen.
I love it. Well, and I just appreciate what you're doing, because that's I think that's an ongoing thing where I look forward to the day when I just have this dream of because again, who are we up against, right? We're up against some pretty big corporate interests, and no matter how many blog posts we write or seminars we conduct, when one celebrity paid for by one major food corporation writes one misguided article in a major magazine, that's touched and changed more lives than each of our individual efforts could ever do. So what do you think we can do as a community to try to rally and affect the mainstream? Because I feel there's almost, in some cases, there's almost even a pride of like, well, forget the mainstream, they're a lost cause. That kind of a thing.
Yeah,
what do you think?
I think, well, I don't remember what conversation I was having with somebody where we were talking about, I don't know if it was like couldn't have been a fast food restaurant or some kind of restaurant or some kind of big box chain that we were talking about, if they were to get organic produce. I can't remember who it was. I have too many conversations like this with my friends, but somebody else was like, well, why would that matter? And I said, well, it matters because it's so huge. Like, it's just us buying produce from our local farmer is fantastic. It's what we should be doing. We should be getting out of the grocery store. Oh, this is what it was. Somebody was, I posted something about Whole Foods and they said, well, why are you even shopping there? And I said, well, I shop there because sometimes I can't get to the farmer, or I've got my lamb, but I can't get chicken sometimes, or whatever it is, and I said, it does matter to me to voice my opinion against what they're doing because they use canola oil in all of their prepared foods, for example. And so I was kind of balking at that and wrote back and I said, well, you'd have a lot more business if you would use even olive oil, which I don't cook with, but I don't think it's poison the way I think canola oil is. And I would eat their prepared foods if they used olive oil instead of canola. And, this person was like, well, why even bother? Don't even shop there, and don't, why bother even making a stir? And I said, well, because that's a really big deal. If you got every Whole Foods in the chain to stop using canola oil in their prepared foods, that's a big difference. It's a big difference in supply and demand. It's a big difference in what's presented to people as what they should do, because I think people look to companies like Whole Foods to be an example of what's sort of ideal in a way, unfortunately, because they have a lot of vegan agenda with the store, but they're making great strides in what they sell in their meat department. So I like to support that. I like to support what I see that's good and, bring up conversation about the things I don't support. I don't have any issue with that. And I think, the same way we're not trying to recreate what Paleo man ate thousands of years ago. If you can source all of your food from a local farmer, great. If you can't, I think there's value to your voice, at that level.
Brilliant. Well, I look forward to hopefully in the future finding a way that we can come together. I mean, I love some of the things that the community does for the 1% who get it, to help them be even healthier. But I would love finding a way for us to say, that's cool, but it's a bit like, the top 1% of this country may not need any more money. Right. I'm not sure the top 1% of the nutrition community need further refinement of, and they might, and that's cool. And I don't want to poo-poo that. Like, that's great.
I'm with you. With you.
But what else can we do? What else can we do? And how do we lead that movement? I don't know.
Well, yeah. And the funny thing is too, I'm with you on that. And I think what's funny is a lot of people who do listen to our podcast, we get a lot of new listeners all the time. And so we try is really getting to that last level of refinement on everything, because we know that we're reaching a really broad audience there. But what's cool is, Facebook pages. I've got, now over 30,000 people on my page kind of following what I'm doing, new people all the time who don't know what we're doing there. What is paleo? Paleo is not in the name of my page because it's not what I started out really doing. And so we have an opportunity every time somebody asks a question to have compassion and to teach them in a way that is not presuming they should already know. I think it's really important to understand the level of awareness that somebody has around what you're doing and to have that compassion so that you don't just say like, what do you mean you still eat bread? You know, we get a lot of people who are kind of snarky about things. And I think it's really off-putting, and I think it makes other people not feel like they're welcome or that their questions are good or valid, you know, and I like to be really as welcoming as possible to those people. And the other thing is, my book, Practical Paleo, really does sort of fill the niche for people who are already eating this way, but maybe needed to know why, or needed to just have a little help, or maybe they just bought it because they like what I do and whatever. I think people who didn't think they would learn anything new learned a lot of new things. And I think the better effect that the book is having is that it's really easy to pass to somebody else to understand what it is that they were doing. You know, here, mom, this is what I've been doing. And I wrote it so that somebody's mom or grandma could understand it and it would make sense in the context of their lives. Now, that being said, the book is called Practical Paleo. So there's a lot of people who may never want to pick it up because it's got this word paleo in the title. And they're like, I don't know if I want to do that. And what I do with the 21-day sugar detox is really a similar approach to eating that sort of starts out a little bit less strict and, you know, includes some foods that I don't think are optimal, but I do think are better, you know, than refined foods. You know, even eating some lentils or some black beans or some rice, I think is going to be better than eating bread and pasta and bagels and Pop-Tarts. And I can say that with confidence. And I'm not, you know, just because I don't eat those things doesn't mean that I think somebody can't at least make a step to be healthier by making that change. And it's a huge change. And so I think that where we can affect more change is by dropping some of the dogma around the fact that eating grains is like killing people, which I think that that's like, you know, too big of a blanket statement. I think there's a lot of reasons why people aren't as healthy as they could be with those foods in their diet. But I think that if you realize that it's not a black or white thing, that there's a spectrum and a continuum that people can sort of get on this path anywhere along the way. And also that they're not a bad person because they started at a different place than you did. They're just in a different place. And it's not this is better than this. It's just, it's different. You know, and we have to really just drop some of those judgments that we have or this idea of perfectionism that we have and allow people to make those small changes and see the success and remember what it was like for us when we started. You know, when you first learned that, you know, whole wheat bread might not be the healthiest thing to eat, that was like your mind was probably blown when we, you know, everybody was there at some point in time. And so, you know, we all have to kind of use a little bit of psychology and understanding how this stuff works and these levels of awareness that people have and just know where they're at so that you can help them where they're at and not try and help them where you're at because it's not effective to do that.
I love that. Help them where they're at, not help them where you at. I might have to put that on a t-shirt. That's brilliant. And I love that you incorporated, we got to use a little psychology here because you're exactly right. There's even a meta level that you touched on there, which is, well, and some people may not pass on my book because it has the word paleo in the title. And that's, I don't want to get too metaphysical for a second here, but even anything like vegetarianism, like anytime you can label something, it's going to turn people off. And in fact, in many ways, I believe we will be successful the day this isn't called paleo or isn't even called SANE anymore. It's just the standard American diet.
Yeah.
And I don't know how, I mean, I think you saw that the video, the slimistsimple.org video we put out, some of the most positive feedback we got about that video is just like, you don't call this anything. Right. You just say, eat natural foods that are good for you. And people can get that. And they don't, no one's just going to be like viscerally, well, that sounds like a gimmick. Eat nutritious foods. Get out of here. You're crazy. But and of course, the nuance is, how do we define what a nutritious food is? However, I think even that is an interesting distinction because what you call something can in and of itself make you lose some people's attention even before you get started.
Yeah, it's definitely true. when I tell other people, they say, well, how do I talk to this person or that person about paleo? And I say, well, don't say the word paleo, first of all, because, you don't know what it's going to do. You don't know what that word is going to do to somebody. But I think usually I tell people to kind of just talk about sugar. Mm-hmm. I'm like, that's a really PC approach,
Yep.
Sugar and refined foods. I'm just, you can just say I'm not eating sugar and refined foods, or I'm not even eating refined foods. I'm just eating whole, natural foods, exactly what you said. And I think, when I talk about the psychology, there's a friend of mine, a colleague, Anthony DeSaro, he's a coach down in Florida, and he came and taught a seminar with me up in Tacoma, Washington several months ago. And he brought this part to the workshop that is from a book. I think it's called Influence, the Science and Practice of. And it's talking a little bit about the psychology of just like what I said about knowing where people are at. And I think it's the great separator, the great sort of leveler between people who will be effective in passing on a message and people who will not be effective. Mm-hmm. And the first person who taught me about or tried to tell me anything about a paleo diet was telling me about saponins and quinoa and how they were punching holes in my gut. And I was eating quinoa in front of this person at the time. And that was like just not the right information to share with me at that time. It wasn't getting through to me at all. It did not make me stop eating it. It did not make me really listen. It just wasn't the right information at the right time. And he was just completely not aware of my level of awareness, or what I was even all about. So just really interesting stuff. And I think we can all be a lot more effective if we wait for someone to ask us a question, about what it is that we're doing or that we're promoting or whatnot, and then really listen before we answer the question. Really try and get where they are and what they believe already.
And build off that. That way you have I believe I forget, it was a Chip and Dan Heath in their brilliant book Made to Stick, where they talk about mental hooks. And if you try to describe a pomelo, which is a form of citrus fruit, as like a round blah, 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 no one gets it. But if you say it's a bit like if you took a honeydew melon and an orange and put it together, people be like, oh, okay, I know what a honeydew melon, this is not exactly what they say in the book, but you go based on what they understand and you say, okay, how like whole grains are better for you than refined grains? Like, how you understand that and you accept that already? Well, for the same reasons that whole grains are better for you than refined grains, spinach is better for you than whole grains. And they're like, okay, like I get that. It's like you're coming from someplace I understand versus just being like, whole grains will kill you kind of a thing.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, I love it, Diane. Well, tell us here, what's next for you? What's next on the horizon? You're always doing all kinds of cool stuff.
So when will this air?
This will probably air about in 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay, great. I have to see what kind of cats I can let out of the bag.
Okay.
Yeah. So what's next for me? I have a handful of events actually coming up that are pretty cool. We've got an event March 9th in Washington, D.C. So just teaching a workshop there. That's the last workshop that Liz Wolf and I will be teaching for the foreseeable future for this year, not for any negative reasons, just because she's moving, her husband's in the military, and we've just got a lot of projects going on. So if anyone's in the Washington, D.C. area, that'll be March 9th. And then Paleo FX is coming up. I'll be speaking there March 29th to the 30th. Let's see. I'll be on the low carb cruise. That is May 5th.
I will see you there.
Oh, Adam. Great. We'll meet. And I'll actually, so you were talking about affecting things at a higher level or a bigger level. I'll be on this panel talk speaking to some people in the flavoring industry about the paleo diet. And it'll be really interesting. I think a lot of them are completely unaware of what we are all about. And, I'll be kind of letting them know that we are not interested in their flavors and that if they want to flavor something, they should just put real ingredients in it and present us with some real food. And that should be really cool. Maybe there will be some cool new quote unquote food products, but maybe, more real foods made into something that we can buy in a store that we think is legitimate. So that might be cool. And the other kind of big cat I'll let out of the bag is that my 21-day sugar detox, which is currently an ebook program only, will be published as a book. Yeah, it'll be totally different than the ebook. It's a completely separate animal. It's going to have a format that's similar to Practical Paleo, where there's kind of the information in the front. It's not going to be like, good calories, bad calories in any way, shape, or form. It's not going to be a dissertation on sugar and all of that. It's just going to be, here's why we have this program. There are meal plans, there are recipes. Go forth and kick your cravings. So that'll be releasing, I believe it's the first week of October this year. So let me see if I can get a date on it for you. October 1st. Actually, it releases October 1st. Yeah. And I think the reason we're doing that is we've got the first Monday in October. So the first Monday of every month is when we kick off a new sugar detox group. And the first Monday of October is technically October 7th. And so people will have their chance to kind of pre-order the book and get their book the week before that next group starts. So, but if people are interested in the sugar detox program, 21daysugardetox.com is the website. The book will be out in October. And yeah, you can get the ebook though and kind of run through the program. There's over 15,000 people on the Facebook page right now. And that group is growing rapidly, like extremely rapidly. I think 5,000 people in the last 2 months. It was just barely 10,000 around Christmas time. So it's just been a huge, huge boom and tons of people are doing it. Lots of bloggers and vloggers posting videos about their experience, which has been really fun to watch. Some really fun videos coming up. So yeah, lots going on for me, and it'll be a busy next several months.
I love it. Well, if people want to learn more, we already mentioned a few things, but let's summarize them here. So we've got your website, balancebites.com, correct?
Yeah.
And then we've got,
yep.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. And the 21-day sugar detox website is again?
Just 21daysugardetox.com, and that's the number 21daysugardetox.com.
Beautiful. And your book is Practical Paleo?
Yeah, Practical Paleo. You can get it on Amazon. Most Costco stores have it unless they've sold out. Barnes & Noble, I definitely recommend if you're going to a store, call them ahead, ask them to grab it and pull it aside for you so you make sure it's there. Or Amazon will always have it for you.
Beautiful. And anything else? Any place else to go? Anything else to check out?
Oh, so many places. You can find me on Facebook, Balance Bites. You can find me on Twitter at Balance Bites, Instagram, Balance Bites, Pinterest, Balance Bites 1. Somebody else had Balance Bites. Yeah, all over the place. But my website, balancebites.com, has, links to all this fun stuff. So.
Beautiful. Well, Diane, thank you so much for sharing your awesome perspective and insights with us today. Hopefully you had a good time. I know I did, and I'm sure our listeners have. And I hope to talk with you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Diane. Hey, everyone. Remember, have a great week and eat more, exercise less, but do it smarter. See you next week.